Thank you very much, Randy. And do remember as well, you can contact us via the mail at Box 8500, Charlotte, North Carolina, zip code 28271. I do want to begin this broadcast by mentioning something that has to do with Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis, who over the years have decried the notion that I don't hold to the young earth creationist perspective. A perspective that views the earth and the universe as being somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 years old. Here's a quote from Ken Ham, who says, Hanegraaff's problem is his unwillingness to understand Genesis in its most natural form as a historical narrative. Now, I'd like to say on this broadcast today that that is far from true. I firmly believe that Genesis is a historical narrative. Of course, it's much, much more than that. I've said this many times, but Moses, with inspired brilliance, interlaces a historical narrative with both symbolism and repetitive poetic structure. He as well employs the powerful elements of story, all of which are necessary to set the foundation for the rest of redemptive revelation. And I typically like to note 3 points in this regard. The first is that Genesis opens with a literary mnemonic, a memory aid by which we're daily reminded of God's creative prowess. The first 6 days, they of course outline a hierarchy of creation culminating in humanity as its crowning jewel. And then on the seventh day, the Creator in whom we ultimately find our Sabbath rests. And as such, the history of creation is remembered and recalled through its association with the continuous 7-day cycle of life. A second point. Genesis is structured in such a way that it may be remembered using our 10 fingers. So with one hand, we recall primeval history. You'll recall the accounts of heaven and earth, Adam, Noah, Noah's sons, and Shem. Shem, of course, the father of the ancient Near East. With the other hand, we remember the accounts of Terah, the father of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, and Jacob, who is called Israel. Now, we ought to note, thirdly, that post-Gutenberg, or after the printing press, were primarily people of the printed page, but that wasn't the case with the ancients. In their predominantly oral culture, people practiced the principles of memory. And as such, Genesis contains many Hebrew symmetries and parallelisms and sevenfold patterns. From its 7-day opening through its 10-fold pattern, Genesis serves as a unified and memorable prologue to the whole of redemptive history. Also, with respect to the Ham hypothesis that the universe is somewhere in the vicinity of 6,000 years old, let me say this. The book of Genesis is not designed to tell you and I how old the universe is. Rather, it's designed, and I think that's quite obvious, to communicate God's purposes in creation. And thus, if you want to know how old the universe is, you're far better served to take a closer look at God's other book. Of course, I'm talking about the book of nature. And I say this because the book of nature provides a veritable host of clues respecting the age of the universe, and there are 3 that I typically like to bring to everybody's mind, the first of which is the fact that nothing travels faster than the speed of light and that billions of light years separate us from distant galaxies, a fact which leads logically to the assumption that the age of the universe is measured in billions rather than thousands of years. The second point is star life, and I've alliterated this to make it easy to remember, speed of light and then star life, which is also a persuasive argument for a universe measured in billions of years. So here's the argument. A star like the sun, that's just one example, has enough fuel to burn for an estimated 9 billions of years, and as such, the universe is presumed to be at least that old. So while biological history may be a matter of inference, astronomical history is a function of direct observation. And here's an example. You've probably heard me use this on the Bible Answer Man broadcast before, but I think it's good to get into your memory trace. It's an example from an astronomical event, an observable event, known as supernova 1987A. This is an event with an identifiable before and an identifiable after. So prior to 1987, this supernova was a star in a distant galaxy 168,000 light years away. In 1987, the star explodes and becomes a supernova. In other words, 168,000 years ago, the star explodes, and in 1987, the light of that event finally reaches Earth. Unless, of course, God created the universe with merely the appearance of age. And if that were the case, the supernova might well be likened to a documentary film of an event that really never happened. A third point is sequential layers. So you have the speed of light, you have star life, and then sequential layers. And I'm talking about layers in the formation of ice cores in places such as Antarctica, which point to an Earth much older than 6,000 years. And just as arborists count tree rings to establish the age of trees, researchers count sequential layers to date the age of ice cores. And this data log seems to demonstrate that the age of the Earth is at least hundreds of times older than the age presumed by the followers of Ken Ham. Now, this is not to say that I, in any form or fashion whatsoever, hold to the biological theory of evolution. And nor is a universe that is even 10 to 20 billion years old sufficient for the evolution of a protein molecule, much less a living cell. Indeed, we can be absolutely certain that the evolutionary hypothesis is a myth. It's a fairy tale for grown-ups. It's a hoax. And it's an astonishingly weak hypothesis. You only need think of the fossil record. No verifiable transitions from one kind to another have as yet been found. And despite the abundance of fossil available to paleontologists, you still don't have these transitional forms. And while I would fight for a person's right to believe in science fiction, I firmly resist evolving attempts on the part of modern evolutionists to equate macroevolution with such scientific certainties as the law of gravity. So no one should take this in any way, this meaning the notion of a 6,000-year universe, which I deny, they shouldn't take this in any way to suppose that I believe in biological evolution. I don't. I've read many resources on this subject, including a flip chart called Memorable Keys to the Farce of Evolution, which you can find on the web at equip.org. Also, a book titled The Farce of Evolution, and many other resources you can find at equip.org. Do remember again how grateful I am for all of you who continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with me in the battle for life and truth. I refuse to ever become politically correct. I want to tell you truth as it is. And I've done that as long as I've been on the Bible Answer Man broadcast, and that's well over 3 decades. We'll be right back with Answers 888 Ask Hank.